Bizarre history lessons about the black community that you didn't know about. Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, welcome back to another fascinating episode. Now today we're getting into some intriguing and lesser known facts from black history that might surprise you. From hidden stories of resilience to significant cultural contributions, black history is rich with profound moments that have shaped our world. And in this video, we'll explore some of these incredible facts, shedding light on the remarkable achievements and struggles of African Americans throughout history. I think the most sidelined aspect of Black American history is the talk of the great contributions that the Black community has brought to the American civilization. I'm talking about infrastructure, buildings, bridges. I'm talking about all those things that were unmentioned in history, things that the Black community contributed majorly in the American society. And perhaps this is one of the biggest reasons as to why they deserve those reparations. Stick around and leave your thoughts in the comment section as we begin.
Hey, good morning. Happy holidays. It's Juneteenth. Did you know that the first people who were stolen from Africa and trafficked to British colonial America were indentured servants? True story. They were given a set period of time to work off their debt, and after that debt was completed, they would be given land. This all started on August 20th, 1619, when 20 Angolans first arrived at Port Comfort. Two of those Africans were Antonio and Isabella, who got their names from the Portuguese who had been enslaving and trafficking Africans since the 1440s. Now, they were known as servants of Captain William Turner, not property, but servants. And in 1623, they gave birth to their son named William Turner, the first African born in British colonial America. And get this, he was born a free man. And that's the way things worked in British colonial America until around 1627 or 28, when the British were like, if all of these Africans are going to get their freedoms, then we're not going to have anyone here to work our fields, and we're not going to make any money in the process. So they forced Africans to work past the end of their contracts. Their punishment for having the audacity to complete their servitude was a lifetime of enslavement. And that's how things were in British colonies. Your punishment for being black or dark-skinned was enslavement, be it in the Americas, South Africa, Australia, or beyond. Wherever you were, if you were a dark-skinned person, your punishment was enslavement. Now, a lifetime of enslavement became legal in the 1640s with the conviction of John Punch. John Punch was an Angolan who was captured and trafficked to the Americas and was bought by Hugh Gwynn. Hugh Gwynn also had white indentured servants, and in 1640, John Punch and a couple of his white indentured servants ran away from Hugh Gwynn's enslavement. They were later captured and brought back. The white indentured servants had 4 years tacked on to the end of their sentence, while John Punch, the African, was given a lifetime of enslavement as his punishment. Now, that was the first time in British colonial America that anyone had been sentenced to a lifetime of enslavement. That case also set up a distinction between Africans and Europeans. Fast forward 10 years and we meet a man named John Castor, an African who's enslaved by another African named Anthony Johnson. Now, John Castor realized that his period of servitude was over a couple years ago, so he sued for his freedom and lost. And he became the second person sentenced to a lifetime of enslavement, even though he did nothing wrong. And that case proved that enslavement was a punishment for Africans who had the audacity to complete their period of servitude. In the 1600s and 1700s, white people created the concept of race and invented racism as justification for their mistreatment of non-white peoples the world over. Now, this gave white people a superiority complex, and in the 1700s, 1800s, and 1900s, they invented scientific racism to prove whites' superiority disorder. And this disorder caused a war between the United States of America and the Confederate States of America. You see, the Confederate States of America wanted to maintain slavery as their way of life. They built their whole way of living around slavery, and they wanted to fight for the right to enslave black people for eternity, while the North was like, nah, you can't do that. Even though we benefit from your particular brand of enslavement, we don't think it's right for you to enslave people for life. And they went to war behind it, and the Confederacy lost. So in 1863, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, effectively ending chattel slavery within the United States. But when the people of Texas got the memo, they didn't care about the abolishment of slavery. They kept the practice going for a full 2 years. So on June 19th, 1865, Major General Gordon Granger marched into Galveston, Texas, and declared that all enslaved people are free, which put an end to slavery as punishment for simply being black. You see, the 13th Amendment ended slavery as a way of life in America, but it kept enslavement as a punishment for anyone who's been duly convicted of a crime. And what were the crimes of the day? Well, vagrancy and loitering. What's a vagrant? A vagrant is a person who has neither home, nor job, nor means to support themselves. And who were the vagrants of the day? Newly freed Africans who had neither plantation to work on or live on. So what's loitering? Loitering is standing around a business idly without purpose. And who were the loiterers of the day? Newly freed Africans who were standing around businesses looking for work. And overnight, the prison population went from 95% white to 95% black. And it did that in part because you couldn't arrest someone's property. After we were no longer considered property, our crimes were being free and looking for work. And we were arrested en masse. And after we were arrested and convicted, we were then leased back to the plantations from which we were just freed. And that's how Juneteenth, the prison industrial complex, and convict leasing became today's moment in white history.
So I'm continuing to argue with strangers on the internet, which I know is not smart. Like, I know, but I can't help it. But hey, white people, just make me feel a little bit better. Enslaved people, built our cities, north and south. Back before New York City was New York City, people came in, and do we think that workers were paid to build the infrastructure, the bridges, the buildings, or do we think we paid them, or do we think we used free labor? 20% of New York City was enslaved people at one point. So did we use the free labor to build these things, or did we pay people? What do we think? See, and my snark is starting to come out, and I promised I would try to do this work without getting snarky, but our country was literally built by enslaved people. And I know that's one of the facts that as white people, we try to not look straight at, because then it makes us feel responsible to do something about the fact that black people are still not getting what they deserve in our country. But you have to look at that. You have to, because it's the truth, and it's the reality of our country. So highways, railroads, big skyscrapers. These things were built by enslaved people. Maybe not big skyscrapers. I don't know when the first skyscraper was built, but of course there were enslaved people in the North. Yes, the North woke up and realized, perhaps we shouldn't own other human beings. They woke up to that first, but that doesn't mean that on the onset that's how it was. There were so many enslaved people bought and sold through New York City port. Come on.
Let's talk about things that even maybe the black community might not be aware of, that slavery might have contributed majorly to the American society. So the legacy of slavery has left an indelible mark on history, as we all know, influencing not only social structures and economic systems, but also contributing to the creation and development of various institutions, industries, and cultural practices. Without slavery, you wouldn't have those. Here are some lessons on things that were created or significantly impactful by slavery. And please, in this video, we're not advocating that slavery was a good thing. I think this video is more focused on the aspect of why the black community deserves those reparations. So the first one is financial institutions and banking systems. So the wealth generated from slavery played a crucial role in the establishment and growth of early financial institutions in Europe and America. Banks and insurance companies often benefited from investments tied to the slave trade and plantations. So the second thing is infrastructure and architecture. Many grand buildings and estates in Europe and the Americas were constructed using wealth derived from slave labor. The opulent architecture of palaces, mansions, and public buildings often relied on resources cultivated or extracted by enslaved people. So when we talk about reparations and the talk where who's gonna pay reparations, right, to the black community, I think the people that benefited. We should take a look at the infrastructures that were created, the infrastructures that are being used by the people who are benefiting from the slavery that was involved with black people. Those are the people that should pay reparations. And if those infrastructures generate profits, that profit or some of that profit should be given in form of reparations. It wouldn't be hard. The third aspect is educational institutions. So some prestigious universities and colleges in the United States, such as Harvard and Yale, benefited from donations and endorsements linked to slave labor and plantation economies. These institutions, while now advocating for diversity and inclusion, have histories intertwined with slavery. Would you look at that? So the fourth one is scientific and medical advancements. So medical experimentation and scientific research often exploited enslaved individuals. For example, experiments on enslaved women in gynecology contributed to advancements in medical knowledge, although at a severe human cost. And we're talking about the unaliving of hundreds, if not thousands, of women that were involved in these experiments. Now, how about culinary traditions in agriculture? So many staple foods and culinary traditions in the Americas, such as rice in South Carolina or sugarcane in the Caribbean, were cultivated by enslaved labor. The agricultural expertise and culinary techniques brought by African slaves significantly influenced local cuisines. So we're talking about those slaves that were involved in plantations and agriculture in Africa and indigenous societies. They were gotten, right, as experts and taken to the Americas and put to oversee these farms, right, and plantations. I think you have come across an aspect of history where even some black individuals did own their own slaves, right? A portion of them did that. So there's that aspect. The other one is legal and political systems. So laws, legal precedents in many countries were shaped by the institution of slavery, right? Legal courts governing property rights, labor relations, and racial segregation often reflected and perpetuated the inequalities rooted in slavery. So we're talking about people who wouldn't be aware of their statuses and wouldn't be aware of a constitution if it wasn't for slavery. Are you seeing that? So slavery was used as the blueprint to create almost everything, including legal structure or legal infrastructure. It was all because of slavery. Would you look at that? We're talking about social hierarchies and cultural norms, which is the seventh aspect. So the concept of race-based slavery helped establish enduring social hierarchies and cultural norms that persist today. So we're not saying slavery was good, but it did help shape the narratives of hierarchies that palm coloreds are benefiting from. So palm coloreds who are benefiting from that should pay reparations. These norms influenced notions of racial superiority, identity, and social status across societies shaped by colonialism and slavery. Would you look at that? The eighth aspect is global trade networks. So the transatlantic slave trade profoundly impacted global trade networks, connecting Africa, Europe, and the Americas in a complex web of commerce that included not only enslaved individuals, but also raw materials, manufactured goods, and luxury items, right? So where should reparations go to? It should go to the descendants of enslaved people, because those were the ones that were being exploited and being used to create all these social infrastructures and hierarchies that we use today. Now, let's talk about art and literature. So artistic expressions in literary works often reflect and critique the legacy of slavery. Are you seeing that? So even artists are benefiting from that. African diasporic cultures in particular have produced rich artistic traditions that confront themes of resistance, identity, and cultural heritage born out of the trauma of slavery. Right, the same artifacts that were stolen and gotten by some people that we don't want to mention here, You see that? They benefited in a lot of ways from slavery. And then the final benefit of slavery, of the final contribution of slavery in this aspect, is labor practices and industrialization, right? Which is the major, I guess, industrialization is the major thing, brought us technology and all these technological advancements. So the exploitation of enslaved labor laid foundational practices for industrialization and modern labor relations. I'm talking about Tesla companies. I'm talking about work relations companies. I'm talking about financial institutions that use the blueprint of slavery to conduct their daily works. The profitability and efficiency of slave labor influenced subsequent economic systems and labor practices in capitalist societies. And that's to show you that Silicon Valley, Hollywood, the entertainment industry, and everything the palm coloreds are benefiting from wouldn't be there if it wasn't for slavery. Just look at what is happening in Congo right now. What would say that's a form of exploitation, right? That can be linked to a form of slavery or a form of manipulation that industries are still benefiting from. You see, so slavery set the blueprint for that. Slavery is the major contributor of billionaires, right? We're talking about multi-billion-dollar companies. It's because of slavery. Now, leave your thoughts in the comment section and tell me what you think about this breakdown discussion. I'll see you in the next video. And hey, if you have any contributions or any research that you would like to add to our work, please feel free to do so in the comments.